Today we're gonna watch. Yes, it's immediately recorded after, so shout out team for that. What if Quebec had voted for independence? Yes, I am from Canada. We go back to older videos. In the background is Canadian flag. Took it down, not because Dad replaced it, because, well, we gotta put it outside, now it's ripped. And we threw it away. Maybe eventually I will bring back a Canada flag and put it somewhere in here. I don't know. It'll be somewhere in the video. Sometime. But it
Two
was
languages, two cultures, so vastly different there is no way they can reconcile. The minority never asked for this. They were conquered, forced into a nation they had no say over. What, you thought I was talking about that whole thing? Oh no, I'm talking about a serious issue. Quebec. Canada. The Great White North. 10 provinces, 3 territories. But one of those provinces is not like the others. One of them is French. Quebec's long history is intertwined with Canada. With the British absorption of New France back in the 7 Years' War, the Quebecois, or Quebecers, are the descendants of those early French colonists who found themselves under the British crown. Ever since then, there were sporadic independence movements, some violent, some not, all for Quebec to go its own way, and it never did. Long story short, the closest they ever got was in 1995. There was a referendum held over whether Quebec should be independent, and the referendum lost by 50,000 votes, the slimmest percentage. So here's an idea. What if Quebec was independent? What if they had voted to go their own way the same year that Toy Story came out? The closest comparison I can really imagine here is another vote that people didn't expect would go through, actually going through. And just like with that vote, a new reality would dawn on everyone in Canada. Pro-independence and not alike, everyone would stop and ask, what next? Seriously, what next? The yes camp was led by a triumvirate, if you will.
I've been excited to receive this for a very long time. The book. The ultimate guide to rebuild.
Of 3 prominent voices. Former Premier Lucien Ricard, founder of Bloc Québécois, the party that led the vote on independence. Mario Dumas, leader of the Conservative Party ADQ, and current Premier Jacques Parizeau. I hope I pronounced any of those correctly. The problem here is all 3 had different ideas about what a yes vote would even lead into. There were some plans to immediately dissolve the Canadian Parliament and call for a new election. Jean Chrétien, the current Prime Minister, most likely would have resigned or been given a vote of no confidence by the Liberal Party. There would be some effort to start negotiations with Quebec's representatives. Really, negotiations were just the main plan. Who would Canada even send to represent them at the table? Nobody knew. There was no procedure for this. And that'd be probably like the first month in general, probably more. Just sheer confusion and chaos. Canada might even send in the Mounties. There'd be riots on the streets. Bombings again. Anarchy reigns free. Alright, maybe not that bad. But it'd still be pretty chaotic. Not as much as Brexit, but still chaotic. One of the biggest provinces in Canada, a quarter of their population, voted to leave. And that's the thing. Legally leave. Even if Quebec did get that 51% of the vote, is this vote even legal? Does Canada have to accept the results of the election? Technically, no. Not at all. Officially, Canada doesn't allow succession. It's not in the Constitution, which is why one of the plans was to create a vote of no confidence that'd lead to a government that would meet with Quebec in the first place. That's just a maybe, though. There is no official parameter for how secession might even go. Just because the election happened, and it happened to have 51% of the vote, it doesn't mean anything. Spain actually had a similar situation in 2017. Catalonia overwhelmingly voted to split off from the rest of Spain. 90% voted yes. And what happened next? Nothing. Spain saw the results and promptly ignored it. For Quebec, such an election may be ignored just not to deal with the headache, especially for a result that wasn't as overwhelming. Or this could just be the start of a dialogue. A grueling legal dialogue. It's either that or just some negotiation for Quebec to gain some sovereign powers. And hey, it's either that or if independence is completely off the table, they might negotiate for Quebec to gain some sovereign powers. We wish to be taken seriously, you know, that type of stuff. Let's say that the 95 vote passes, and the dialogue begins. To amend the Canadian Constitution, the change has to be ratified through the House of Commons, the Senate, and a majority of the other provinces. So in a way, for Quebec to even become independent, they didn't just need an extra 50,000 votes, they really needed an entirely second election, a democratic consensus, if you will, from the rest of Canada
Honestly,
to even be given the opportunity to
you.
legally leave. Why not? Let's say those dreams come true. Maybe everyone's just sick of Quebec and they let them go. This election drama just kind of consumes Canada for a decade and a half. But at the end of the tunnel, Quebec becomes its very own independent nation. Yippee. Now what? What would an independent Quebec even be like, other than big and French? Well, first, it probably wouldn't be this particular shape. Honestly, if the French population wanted to leave, only the French regions would probably leave. Quebec has indigenous and English-speaking populations, and they would probably just be absorbed into the other provinces. But hey, even if that's done, there's no changing Quebec's biggest feature, their location, primarily on the St. Lawrence River, a river that Canada is very reliant on for sea access, and it's now through an independent country. It'd be like if Louisiana split from the US and the US lost access to the Gulf of Mexico. Oh wait, we did see that happen. Though I don't think the end result would be as dramatic in this case. Ontario and Quebec are each other's closest economic partner, and considering that NAFTA exists, it's likely Quebec would just be included into NAFTA upon its independence. Economically, there would still be a lot of hurdles. If there is a deal that goes through, it's going to be one that lessens the pain as much as possible. I can't imagine Quebec would want to disrupt its economy by putting too many walls up with its neighbors. An independent Quebec really just seemed like it wanted to exist for cultural reasons. Like, we're too different from the rest of Canada, we should rule ourselves. They really just like the idea of having a border, like a border would be nice. When it comes to economics, though, the newly freed Quebec would probably try everything to make the transition as smooth as possible. And really, the United States would have a vested interest to make sure this goes as smoothly as possible. Even though it is a Canadian matter, America doesn't want an economic time bomb next to their border, so I can imagine that in the negotiations, we might see the most meddling by the Americans in Canadian affairs since the War of 1812. Maybe not that dramatic. The funniest part of this scenario is kind of how undramatic it is, at least compared to any of my other videos. For Canada in the late 20th century, though, this is like the most important thing that has ever happened, but that's not really saying much. Sorry, Canada. The reality now is that by the early 2000s, maybe mid-2000s, there could be a free Quebec. Who knows, maybe 2010. It really depends on how negotiations go. But by the time that is finished, where would Quebec be compared to the rest of the countries in the world? Let me put my statistics hat on. I'll be like real-life lore. In 2009, Quebec had the 37th largest economy in the world, 20% of Canada's entire GDP. Now those are good numbers, but that's under the assumption that independence doesn't throw a Molotov into their economy. Even in the worst case scenario though, they'd still be like a middling European power in terms of wealth. Especially considering in the late 2000s their population was only like 7.5 million. In terms of international relations, Quebec would still need to be recognized by the countries of the world. And in my opinion, I think that while a lot of nations might be apprehensive to recognize a minority state declaring independence, considering they have their own minorities, I also think that this is just Quebec, and nobody would really care that much. Okay, that sounds terrible. I'm joking, kind of. Like, the situation with Quebec's whole independence movement is so much different than the reality that most minorities see across the world. Like, there isn't armed rebellions of Quebecers attacking Mounties or something. And if Quebec had a whole referendum and decade-long legal discussion to split from Canada, that's a whole lot different than an armed minority fighting to gain legitimacy. You know what I'm saying? This isn't like the Kurds or anything. I really just don't feel like many people will be politically charged about this issue other than the Quebecers and Canadians themselves, and many will probably just accept the new status quo for the sake of relations. Now hey, maybe Quebec independence might lessen Quebec nationalism, ironically enough. Like, I'm not from Quebec, so I don't have the best viewpoint on this, but so much of this really feels like it comes from the idea of being included in a federation they were never asked to join. Perhaps after the whole drama of actually separating happens, and they're out of Canada, maybe that fear of losing their francophone identity kind of goes away. Quebec wouldn't really be a territory of nationalist French Catholicism or anything. As the trend seems to be across the entire Western world, an independent Quebec would probably be secular and similar to a Western European nation, if anything. I mean, they already kind of want to be a Western European nation. So what else is there to even say in regards to Quebec itself? It'd split off legally, but it would still be a member of NAFTA. I could imagine a European-style system regarding Quebec and Canada's borders. Like they just wouldn't even bother setting up a whole passport system, since nobody would want to disrupt the commerce and travel from Ontario to the Atlantic. Nothing really dramatic. But Cody, you ask, couldn't this start a chain reaction within Canada, as other provinces would want to leave? And to that I say, yeah, Jimmy, that's pretty interesting. This is a scenario that has been asked a lot on the internet for a while. Many suggest that perhaps the western provinces could have broke off, and maybe even the Atlantic too, considering they're split off from the rest of Canada. I mean, it'd be funny to imagine Canada just imploding immediately. Ontario would be the dominant province of the whole country, and the power imbalance would be too great. Yet, even doing research into the attitudes at the time, nobody seriously was considering leaving if Quebec did too. Like, there's hints of some movements, but the leaders of the provinces weren't aiming on doing that. Now, there's an argument you can make that maybe nobody thought Quebec would actually leave, and then, hey, once they did, people would start considering it. That's entirely possible. This is a Brexit-type conundrum where you don't really know what will happen until you're through the looking glass. Who knows the political ramifications it would have on Canada? You know, I can't imagine Canada would just immediately implode, but it would start a precedent for the next few decades. Say one that even happens in an alternate 2023. If the Constitution of Canada was altered where provinces could vote to leave, some might take the opportunity to do it if they ever get pissed at the federal government. Or say, this guy. Man, this is going to be a minefield of a topic. Justin Trudeau. Ever since 2015, Trudeau has been the biggest political force in Canada, controversies and all. Now, when it comes to unpopular politicians, there is always some forces that call for independence because they hate whoever is in charge. We saw that with California with Trump, and Texas with Biden. These are usually fringe ideas that never go anywhere. And with Trudeau, we saw the same thing happen in Alberta. Western Canada has historically seen itself as distinct from the power base in Ontario. I mean, look at that distance. Saskatchewan hinted at wanting to leave when Quebec did, funnily enough. This never went anywhere, and probably wouldn't go anywhere in this alternate timeline. At least until the ascension of Justin Trudeau. Alberta is already jokingly called an American state sometimes, and the West in general is far more conservative than the rest of Canada. Who is to say how dramatically Quebec leaving would influence the very idea of Canadian unity? With the constitutional change, the Western provinces would have an example to follow from Quebec in holding an election for independence. According to a poll in 2019 by the Angus Reid Institute, 50% of Albertans supported independence. Now, who's to say how reliable this poll actually is? But you can't deny there is very clearly some broader culture war and political motivations here. If it was constitutionally possible to achieve, who's to say? Maybe in an alternate today, the motivation to split would be a lot stronger. One influenced by the turbulent politics of the United States in 2016 even. I mean, think about it, Western Canadian independence may be supported by the American right as a people's self-determination to leave a liberal government. Really, just like with anything with Americans, they would see themselves in this issue. The United States already had settled the whole splitting off thing, but Canada never had, and they just saw Quebec leave.
If Shiro gets back,
Welcome to Rain at Metrotown.
Spain.
Central Park in your backyard.
Or Abu
Skytrain
Dhabi.
just...
I mean, come on, you could just imagine this being an alternate political issue of the Trump era. Alberta and Saskatchewan want to leave Canada, and the issue is split between American party lines. Trudeau dismisses the intent of the vote and them wanting to leave, but he's powerless to stop it. And the American public is interested in seeing the results because many suspect what would happen if these provinces left Canada. They would want to join the United States. Now, Canadian conservatives and American conservatives are not one for one, but there is a similar ideological connection there. A similar disdain for overreaching liberal governance. I could just imagine this issue becoming a major talking point in the US. Is Western Canadian independence valid? Are these just a bunch of conservative hicks that are taking their ball and going home? Those on the left equate them to the Confederates, those on the right equate them to the Texans or Californian republics. It becomes a diplomatic crisis at its very core. Trump makes an offhand comment about how he would accept the provinces into the US. Trudeau denounces him for annexing Canadian territory. You lived through the last decade. You know how it would go. Alberta and Saskatchewan leave and temporarily become an independent nation, while immediately holding an election to join the US. What if that vote passes? Would the US willingly absorb 2 provinces from their closest neighbor in the modern day? I mean, this would be a nuke to Canadian relations. Probably would make the rest of the West turn their heads, but what are they gonna do? Russia would denounce America for annexing land, calling them a hypocrite. Everyone would probably share that newspaper clip from Fallout about the US invading Canada. This would be a political issue among party lines, yet it funnily followed the oldest American tradition of all, compromise. Yes, these are 2 new conservative states, but coincidentally, there are also 2 liberal states that have wanted to join the Union for a long time, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. Is it possible that both sides might come together to balance the map? Bring in 4 new states, making the number of stars on the flag 54. Maybe. It'd probably be the best shot these 2 ever have at being states, so it would permanently alter the relationship between the 2. But with the loss of Quebec, I mean, who knows? The US would really just be dealing with Ontario, so Quebec's independence is never really thought of a lot, ever, by Americans. But I could imagine that if it had happened, it's possible that it could have changed the very shape of the United States, literally. Imagine the continental United States looking like this. This vote would alter how Canada would even view itself as a true nation state. What nation really allows provinces to leave if they happen to vote on it? Had that avenue been opened, I can imagine it gives a lot more people ideas. Today, Quebec independence is not really considered anymore, especially among the younger generation. The 1995 vote was kind of that last opportunity when emotions were so high. 50,000 votes prevented a lot of chaos, and perhaps even saved Canada itself. This is Cody of Alternate History Hub.
Oh my god, has it really been another year already?
Hey, Jimmy!
Hey Cody. You ever feel like time is just...
This is getting posted and recorded the same day, so on Friday. Oh god. But still, thank you for watching. See you next time. Peace.